What if one man, twice, entered a room that officially doesn't exist, just to speak with someone who officially isn't alive? In this story, there's no war, no press conference, no headline. Just a silent corridor, and a door marked Room 3. Vladimir Putin didn't visit a prisoner. He visited a memory. One that spoke in whispers, and left no trace on paper. And yet, everything changed after that second visit. Who was she? Why did she never age? And what did Putin see in her eyes that altered the tempo of his rule? This is not a conspiracy theory. This is the story the records forgot, but the silence remembered. The prison without a name. The facility didn't appear on any map. No coordinates. No satellite trace. Officially, it didn't exist. It was just referred to as Sector 12, a name whispered only among a specific circle in Moscow's intelligence hierarchy. Somewhere between Smolensk and the Belarusian border, deep inside a restricted woodland, it stood behind triple-layered fencing, covered in radar-reflective netting. From above, it looked like a cold stretch of forest. On the ground, it felt like time had stopped. Only 5 people were authorized to enter without prior notice. One of them was Vladimir Putin. It was late winter in 2005 when Putin arrived unannounced. No motorcade. No press. No aides. Just a single vehicle and 3 plainclothes guards. The guard at the first gate didn't even ask for credentials. He simply turned pale, saluted, and unlocked the path. Inside, the air smelled sterile, like rust, ammonia, and forgotten paper. Every wall was painted a lifeless gray. The lighting buzzed slightly, a soft mechanical hum that made time feel elastic. The prison had only 7 cells, all isolated in separate wings. But that day, Putin asked to go straight to Cell 3. No one knew who was held in Cell 3. Even the guards rotated monthly and were never told names. They only referred to the prisoner by a code name, Orlov. But the man inside wasn't a terrorist, a foreign agent, or a political figure. He had no record, no trial. He had simply been placed there. Putin walked the corridor alone. When the final door opened, the prisoner didn't look surprised. He was in his early 60s, wearing a standard uniform, hair cropped short, face lined but steady. He didn't stand up. Didn't even blink. Just smiled. "So," he said, "it's time again." Putin didn't respond immediately. He sat in a single metal chair bolted to the floor and rested his hands on the table between them. "Do you remember what you told me last time?" Putin asked. The prisoner chuckled. "I remember everything. That's why I'm still here." For the next hour, no cameras recorded. The internal mic system cut out, intentionally. Guards were ordered to stay outside the corridor. What was said remains a mystery. But witnesses outside claimed the tone was calm, intimate even. Like 2 men discussing old plans, one forgotten, one still alive. When Putin left the cell, his expression had changed. It was subtle. But those who knew him closely said his posture seemed heavier. As if a weight had returned, one he had trained himself to ignore for years. Back in the car, he didn't speak. The convoy returned to Moscow silently, and the visit was never logged. But within a week, several Kremlin advisors were replaced, and a minor intelligence reform bill was passed quietly through the Duma. Few connected the events. Fewer dared to ask. 6 years later, in 2011, he went back. Again, no press. Again, no explanation. And again, to Cell 3. This time, the prisoner stood as he entered. And this time, he said something before Putin even spoke. "She's back, isn't she?" Putin froze. "Who?" "You know who." Putin didn't answer. Instead, he asked a different question. "What do I do this time?" The prisoner leaned closer. "You won't like the answer." That meeting lasted longer, nearly 2 hours. When it ended, Putin reportedly asked for all exit routes out of Moscow to be reviewed and updated. Within a month, several minor border checkpoints had new biometric systems installed. The reason given was logistical modernization. The truth was something else. Back in cell 3, the prisoner returned to his cot and stared at the ceiling. He whispered something over and over. "She's back. She's back. She's back." But no one heard. Because no one was listening. The woman in the photograph. For days after the second visit, an envelope arrived at Volkov's desk. Volkov, a mid-level Kremlin analyst known for never asking the wrong questions, had a reputation for discretion. His job was to monitor internal inconsistencies, small policy shifts, strange budget allocations, unexplained orders. But that envelope didn't come through official channels. It had no seal, no markings, and no return address. Inside, a single black and white photograph. A woman standing in front of an old building, snow in the background, her hands hidden in her coat pockets. Her face was sharp, almost severe, but with a sadness behind her eyes that felt too intentional to be accidental. On the back of the photo, a handwritten note. Cell 3. She knew before he did. Volkov didn't sleep that night. He ran facial recognition. No hits. He checked all known associates from Putin's Leningrad days. Nothing. He even used outdated KGB archives, hoping for a lead. After 11 hours, he found a match, not in a file, but in a restricted photo log labeled SHT-47. The image was from 1988. A surveillance frame. The same woman. Same coat. Same building. Except in that photo, she was standing beside a younger man. One Volkov recognized immediately, Putin, in his early days with the KGB, during his East Germany assignment. The file had only one line of description: asset, Elena. Status, transferred. No further details. Transferred where? To whom? Why? Volkov requested access to deeper archives but was blocked. The system flagged his inquiry, and within hours, a quiet message from internal security reminded him, focus on your assigned domains. He didn't try again. But the image lingered in his mind. Meanwhile, something changed in Putin's behavior. Publicly, nothing was different. Speeches, handshakes, television appearances, all textbook. But those closest to the Kremlin noticed a tightening in his schedule. Fewer off-the-record meetings. Less delegation. He started reviewing intelligence briefs himself, even those far beneath his rank. It was as if he no longer trusted the filters. Volkov, still haunted by the photo, took a risk. He reached out to a former archivist from the SVR, someone who'd been quietly let go in 2004 after what was referred to as a processing error. They met in an abandoned station beneath the outskirts of Moscow, where signals were dead and conversations felt safer. The archivist didn't recognize the woman's name but froze when shown the 1988 image. She wasn't a KGB agent, he whispered. She was a foreign retrieval. What does that mean? Volkov asked. The man leaned forward, voice lower. Captured. Never listed. Used for conversation trials. Volkov felt sick. Like experiments? No. Like scripts. Like someone wanted to test future outcomes. It didn't make sense. But somehow, it fit. The archivist handed Volkov a name, scribbled hastily on a cigarette box, Dmitry Sokolov. A former KGB linguistics specialist. Now disappeared. Ask him, the archivist said. If he's still alive. Volkov tracked him down 3 days later. Sokolov was living in a decaying rural village, pretending to be deaf. When Volkov presented the photo, the man didn't react until he saw the handwritten note. His face went pale. She died in that prison, Sokolov said. But she's not dead. You understand? No, Volkov replied. But I think Putin does. Sokolov reached into a drawer and pulled out a cassette tape. It was labeled only with the number 3. She recorded something, he said. For him. The day before she was transferred. Volkov took the tape. Listen that night. The voice was soft, cracked by age and pain, but unmistakably intelligent. She spoke of choices, illusions, and the danger of forgetting who you were before the power arrived. Then, near the end, a chilling line. If he comes back a second time, it means the first version failed. Volkov didn't sleep for 2 nights after that. He now understood, Putin didn't visit a prisoner. He visited a mirror. The silence directive. When Volkov tried to share the tape with his superior, it didn't go well. He had barely mentioned the phrase cell 3 before the air in the room changed. His boss, a man known for laughing even during nuclear drills, simply went quiet. Then, without looking up from his desk, he said, "Forget you ever saw it. And forget you ever had this conversation." Volkov knew what that meant. He'd been in intelligence long enough to read between silences. But it wasn't just the warning. It was how effortlessly it came. Like his superior had rehearsed the line years ago, knowing it might be needed. That night, Volkov packed everything, tape, notes, photographs, and drove west. Not to flee, but to disappear inside the system. He knew how to hide. It was part of his training. He'd reappear only if the signals aligned again. Back in Moscow, an internal operation began quietly. Files related to Elena, SHT-47, and any mention of Cell 3 were flagged for deletion. But not overwritten. Just moved to an off-network archive known internally as Vault Delta. No one admitted who ran it. But the login screen bore only one word, O0. Meanwhile, Putin issued a new executive order, seemingly unrelated, an expansion of internal cybersecurity teams. The public reason? Rising cybercrime. The internal reason? Something more specific, monitoring linguistic drift patterns in Russian speech across digital channels. It sounded like a joke. But to insiders, it meant one thing: they were tracking code words. And possibly, code people. Then came the third event. A retired general, Leonid Myrov, was found dead in his apartment. No signs of forced entry. No trauma. Just a glass of untouched vodka and a folder on his table labeled Echo Protocol. The contents were removed before investigators arrived. But the first officers on the scene said the folder contained a single photograph, one of Putin, sitting across from a woman in a cold, sterile room. The woman's face had been scratched out. But something about her posture, the slight tilt of her head, the hand folded over the other, Volkov recognized it instantly when the photo leaked for 2 minutes on an encrypted channel. It was Elena. Or whoever she had become. Whispers spread in intelligence circles. That Putin hadn't just visited Cell 3. He'd returned with instructions. Not orders. Not commands. Instructions, meant only for him. Soon after, high-level meetings at the Kremlin changed in structure. No phones allowed. No recording. Agendas written by hand and burned post-session. Staff noticed something odd. Putin sometimes paused mid-sentence, as if listening to someone no one else could hear. And the mirror room reopened. Buried beneath the old KGB training center, the mirror room was once used for psychological interrogation, walls entirely reflective, a single chair in the center, microphones hidden behind glass. It hadn't been used since the 90s. Until now. Putin entered alone. And stayed for hours. When he exited, he asked a single question to his closest advisor: "Is she still being watched?" The advisor, stunned, replied, "Who?" Putin didn't answer. Instead, he turned to the wall and muttered, "If she speaks again, the silence ends." That phrase triggered something. Within 48 hours, a directive was issued from the Ministry of Communications, codenamed Directive Orpheus. Its function, to monitor, suppress, and erase specific voice patterns from digital platforms. Not words. Not languages. Voices. The target? Unknown. But those who saw the logs noticed an odd correlation. Every flagged voice recording was feminine. Calm. Slightly accented. And they all ended with the same phrase. History isn't written by survivors. It's written by those who remember. Volkov, now living in obscurity, received one of those clips anonymously. No IP. No origin. Just a title, 3B_revised.mp3. He listened. And for the first time, he cried. Because the voice wasn't warning. It was remembering. And someone, somewhere, wanted that memory erased. The man who watched too long. He was known only as Archivist N. No full name. No personnel file. Not even a badge. Yet he held one of the highest levels of access within the Russian State Historical Division, the unit that, on paper, simply catalogued Soviet-era footage. In truth, it monitored any visual trace of what the government preferred to forget. For years, N lived like a ghost. Arrived before sunrise, left long after dark. No calls. No family. His eyes were always tired, as if they'd spent too many hours staring into events the world had buried. But he had a secret hobby, something no one in his division ever knew. He collected silence. Old tapes, scrapped audio reels, untagged cassettes with no metadata, any content deemed useless because it had no sound. He would clean them, restore them, and listen to the quiet between the nothing. It was on one of those reels that he first heard her. Just 5 seconds. A breath. Then a soft, fading whisper. Elena never left. The tape had no label, no year, no source. Just a numerical tag, R701/B. But N recognized the timestamp structure. That format was reserved for prison audio, and only one prison in Russia used that exact format, Sector 12. The one that didn't officially exist. He isolated the waveform and compared it against all other vocal imprints in the archive. It matched nothing, except a degraded 1988 field interview from East Berlin. The subject, Elena. He played it 100 times. Same cadence. Same breath. Same tragic melody in the tone. N wasn't a believer. He didn't chase conspiracies. But he knew when something shouldn't exist, and that breath, that name, on a reel supposedly wiped in 1996, was impossible. Still, he said nothing. He just added it to his silent archive. Until one night, at 2:17 a.m., his internal terminal lit up with an override signal. The system began deleting folders, fast. Entire decades vanished in seconds. Projects flagged as redacted turned to black screens. And then, a final prompt appeared. This is not memory. This is rehearsal. That phrase wasn't just cryptic. It was terrifyingly familiar. He'd seen it once, years ago, etched onto a file box buried in a locked subvault beneath his division. Back then, he'd assumed it was a joke. A strange label on a mislabeled shelf. Now, it was a directive. N panicked. He tried to stop the deletions. Tried to isolate the source. But nothing worked. The system was responding to a command that bypassed every security layer. He reached for the reel. But it was gone. In its place, a small envelope. No return address. Just a slip of paper inside, reading, "She's not the prisoner." That night, N fled. Left his office. His job. His identity. Disappeared into the folds of the country like smoke. 2 weeks later, whispers emerged on internal networks, the archivist is leaking. Short clips began appearing on anonymous message boards. Not full conversations, just fragments. Breaths. Pauses. A soft, distant voice. Each clip had one thing in common. A signature sound, a faint metallic hum in the background, like a recording made in a room filled with machines, or mirrors. Meanwhile, back in Moscow, Putin called a closed-door meeting with 4 surviving members of a now-defunct KGB psychological unit, Project Vesna. The agenda was unknown. But one of the attendees, a man in his 80s, was later seen exiting the building in tears. He told a journalist, under the condition of anonymity, "We never erased her. We just failed to understand what she was." By the end of that week, an old Soviet manuscript surfaced online. The title? "The Future Must Forget." It was fiction, or so the metadata claimed. But halfway through, a chapter read like a transcript. A man enters a cell. A woman does not look up. She says, "You came back because you know I didn't lie." Then silence. Then a mirror. Then everything fades. The prisoner Putin visited twice. It was late autumn when Putin returned. Not to the Kremlin. Not to any place listed on official maps. But to a cold, nameless compound deep within a Siberian corridor, known only to a few as Sector Theta. The convoy was small. No lights. No media. Just silence and frost. He entered the facility alone. No aides. No guards. He walked through narrow corridors lined with reinforced glass, past doors sealed not with bolts, but with memory. At the end of the hall, room 3. The same number Volkov had found. The same digit on the cassette. The room was bare, steel floor, single chair, mirror wall. And her. She was older now. Or perhaps not. Her appearance seemed untouched by time. Not ageless, but suspended. Like she had paused herself while the world sped ahead. She didn't look surprised to see him. She didn't speak. Putin sat across from her. For 7 minutes, they stared at each other. Neither moved. Neither blinked too long. It was a contest of silence, loaded with everything that couldn't be said in public, in reports, or even in thought. Then she spoke. Only once. "You remembered." Putin didn't reply. But his eyes gave her the answer. She nodded slightly, as if satisfied. He reached into his coat and placed a worn photograph on the table. The same one Volkov had received. Only this time, there was a new message written on the back. She knew because she chose not to forget. Then, she stood. Walked to the mirror. And placed her hand against it. A sound, a low-frequency hum, filled the room. The mirror shimmered slightly, not as if it were glass, but water under tension. Then it faded to black. The room dimmed. The hum stopped. She was gone. Not like death. Like erasure. Putin stood there for another 7 minutes. When he left the compound, he gave no orders. Issued no commands. But those closest to him began to notice something had changed. Not in his policy. Not in his speech. In his rhythm. He hesitated before key phrases. He paused before handshakes. It was like he was constantly checking with someone, internally. Weeks later, during a high-level summit, an aide leaned in to whisper a routine briefing. Putin interrupted mid-sentence and said softly, "She's not watching anymore." No one understood what he meant. But the aide never returned to his post. Meanwhile, across Europe, strange data patterns emerged. Short audio clips, all under 5 seconds, with voices no algorithm could trace. Not spam. Not AI. Not even human, exactly. Each ended with a phrase. If memory becomes power, silence becomes control. Then, nothing. All servers hosting the clips shut down within minutes. And across the intelligence world, a quiet consensus formed. The woman in cell 3 was never a prisoner. She was a variable. A fork in the timeline. A memory designed to test the endurance of power. And Putin? He had visited her not to interrogate, but to remember who he was before everything else told him who to be. Some stories are erased because they never mattered. Others are erased because they mattered too much. What if this wasn't about control or secrets, but about memory itself? If this made you question what you thought you knew, then consider subscribing. Your curiosity keeps this channel alive. And if you believe some truths are better told in silence, hit like and share the story.